Hello and welcome back. Today we have a lot of things going on in the garden. We're going to be doing a round of harvesting. I also have a lot of maintenance to do in the garden. We have new things to be planting for the fall, for a fall harvest, and then we have some devastating stuff. And I thought I would bring you guys along for moral support. I thought this was going to be a really fun harvesting video, and it will be, but I discovered something absolutely devastating last night. I was up late last night researching. I was up early this morning stressing about it. So it's something I've never experienced in my 16 years of gardening, and we're gonna do it together. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Katie. I am a Zone 3/Zone 4 Minnesota gardener. It is chilly here in this August morning. I think it's 48 degrees. So it already feels like our super short season is extra short this year. We should still hopefully hold on to the gardening season until mid-September, but we'll see. Let's get started. So first up, we're gonna harvest some cucumbers. These are just the perfect size for pickling cucumbers. You don't want them to get too much bigger than this, otherwise they get kind of seedy and they aren't quite as good. So once they start to yellow, not as good anymore. These are the H19 pickling cucumber, and I just love these. They are awesome. And to harvest, I just like a little twist action and they pop right off. Oh, cool. Looks like we have a double cucumber there. I've been making so many quick pickles, so I've since given up on canning pickles. They always tend to end up a little bit soft anyways. Fridge pickles are so much easier to make than canning, and I just think they taste better. I also like to make fermented pickles, so I will do a little bit of that as well. Okay, I think I got them all. Trying to look back here. And there we go. Just 6 today, not a huge haul because I do try to get out here every other day to pick cucumbers, so I'm kind of constantly bringing those in. So next, I'm just looking for any general maintenance that needs to happen here. Like you can see, this vine is kind of going off into nowhere land and will eventually either break or droop to the ground or hit the electric fence. So just kind of going through and retraining them back up the fence. You can see this guy's kind of going all crazy. Try and dip him up and through. There you go. Otherwise, I think we're doing pretty good. I'm also checking at the bottom for any vines that are coming out onto the ground. I've just been snipping those off. So this one is coming straight down, and there isn't a ton of room up here. So I'm gonna bring out my handy dandy little snippers and we'll just trim that off. And I just throw all my clippings out in the yard and then I'll pick them all up afterwards. And I always do a quick check for cucumber beetles, for any signs of disease, and I think we're doing just fine. I haven't noticed anything here at least. Let's move on to the tomatoes. So these are my pink bower tomatoes, which are our slicer tomatoes, and these have just been gorgeous. I'm just loving these. I've been slicing them up and putting feta cheese on them with some balsamic vinegar and fresh basil. Oh my gosh, and some salt. So good. So it looks like we have a few that are ripe. They're kind of misleading because they have that green striping in there. They kind of almost don't look ripe, but they are. Looks like we have a few in there. Chickens sure are chatty this morning. Now beyond that, we have our canning tomatoes or our paste tomatoes. We have a few of these to harvest, and I'm okay with harvesting tomatoes that are still kind of orange. They're gonna ripen in the house. That lasts a little bit. I don't like to pick them green because they will get a few more nutrients if they're left on at least mostly ripe, but this is close enough for me. But like these are not quite ripe enough for me. I like to see a little bit more red before I pick. Awesome. So I think I'm getting enough of these tomatoes now that I can start canning all the tomato things like pasta sauce and salsa and pizza sauce and tomato sauce, you name it. Up until now, when I just have them trickling in a few at a time at the beginning of the season, I tend to just freeze them and collect them in gallon Ziploc bags. But I think we've officially hit the phase of production. We're ready to go. The last of these tomatoes are my little mountain vineyard grape tomatoes, I guess. Love these. These are so delicious. We've had off and on lots of rain and then periods of drought, and they don't split. I've had problems with cherry tomatoes splitting before, but these are great. The flavor's awesome. They freeze dry really well, so hopefully we'll get a lot picked today. I think the chickens are jealous that I'm chatting with you and not them. Drama, drama, drama. You would think someone's trying to murder them. Probably squabbling over the nesting boxes. Yeah, Mr. Rooster, you tell him. Not as much on this one. This is ripening a little bit earlier, that's for sure. All right, that's a pretty good haul for this morning. Now we have some serious maintenance to do on these tomato plants. So first of all, we're starting to get some leaners. So this guy has kind of flopped over into the next plant, and I've already staked up a few of them, but this is the one we need to do this morning. I love tomato cages just because they're easy, but they do, even these big strong cages, they can only support so much. So just these short stake posts, or whatever you want to call them, work great. So I think that's pretty good. And I have heavy clay, rocky soil, so we'll see what we get with the spot. We might have to try multiple locations. It's going okay so far. All right. Okay, I think I'm gonna go give them some treats, because that will sometimes break them out of whatever funk they're in. I will be back. And by treats, I just mean sprinkling some of their own food on the ground. Magic. They think it's something totally different. You guys want something? Here. Here. Nothing to be afraid of or to be bickering about. Here. Whoa. It's pretty exciting. All right. We'll see if that controls the madness for a bit. All right, so last step for tomatoes for general maintenance is we need to be looking for disease. Mostly blight is what I struggle with around here. This is just a little bit, not too bad. These are my plum regal tomatoes, which I love so much, but over here is my problem child. This is the Amish paste tomato, and I thought I was gonna be all adventurous and try a new tomato variety, but it's just been awful. I've been pruning off so much. You can see that like the whole bottom third of this plant is bare, and we're just gonna keep chopping these diseased leaves off. I am not so happy with how this is going, and I feel like it is starting to spread to these guys. And the wet, rainy season really hasn't been helping at all either. So let's start trimming. And I'm gonna go ahead and prune these plum regals first, since they're my best tomato, because if I go the other way, potentially disease could spread from this shears from the Amish paste tomatoes to my plum regal. Of course, I'll be cleaning the pruners too, but just to be safe, I'm just gonna do the problem one last. And I'm also cutting off any of these leaves that are hanging straight down, because those can be infected with blight too. So we're just gonna trim off anything that seems like it's causing problems, and I'm just throwing them out in the yard. I'll get them later. You don't want to leave them in the yard, because then the blight can get in your soil, and then it's really hard to control. And this is also going to help just naturally improve the airflow in here, which is good, because again, we have just had so much rain. It's been raining every single day this week. We only had really 1 week this entire summer where it started to finally dry out. All of our trails are still underwater. There's some trails we haven't even been able to mow because they're just completely flooded. Hate to wish away the rain, but it's causing problems. That one's looking pretty good. Just little bits on these guys. Nothing too awful, which is good. This one's actually looking pretty good. Except for maybe this one leaf. Oh, I found another leaning tomato. Taz, our girl's best friend. Okay, now where did I put my pruners? There they are. This plum regal's looking awesome. Nothing to do here. Good job. This plum regal is also looking good, but I don't like how low some of these leaves are to the ground. So I'm gonna go ahead and just prune this lower chunk off. There, that's looking better. So now we have the Amish paste tomatoes to deal with, and I don't even know where to start. I feel like pretty much everything needs taken off, which would kill the plant. You have to leave some leaves, right? But, oh, it's just awful. Awful, awful, awful. Not a fan here. It's gonna look bad once we're done. Kind of halfway tempted to just rip all these guys out, but kind of need those tomatoes. Never again, friends. And I know on my garden tour video, I was all excited that these were ripening first, the Amish paste tomatoes over the plum regals. But the plum regals were ripe like 5 days later. So it wasn't even that big of an advantage. Okay, well, we definitely have good airflow now. Sounds like the chicken drama is back. A lot of people like to demonize roosters for being loud, but I tell you, those hens are just about as loud. Are you singing? Some of these are getting extra long, and these aren't gonna support fruit well, so I'm just gonna snip these off the growing tip. And anyways, we are just about getting to the point where I top my tomato plants anyways. We have such a short growing season here in Minnesota that about a month before our expected first frost, which, oh gosh, it's probably next week, I'll top all the growing tips off, so it'll force the plant to ripen what it has instead of putting on new fruit, which will never ripen in time before it freezes. So not afraid of topping the plant at this point. Long growth, just kind of get the end snipped off there. I'm sorry the light is kind of intense this morning. It's hard to find a good time to do these gardening videos. Evening is ideal with that really nice golden hour sun, but the mosquitoes get so awful here once the sun starts setting, and in the evening I'm wanting to cook dinner and I have some quality time with Ryan, so tried to get out here early, 7:30. I thought at least we had some good light when we started, but thanks for bearing with me. Oof, this one's awful. We'll see if we leave anything on here. Yeah, I think Amish paste tomatoes are officially out in my book. Not doing this again. Especially with my tomato cage method, I just think I'm not set up for indeterminate tomatoes who just want to vine and go and go and go. And to be honest, our season is so short in Minnesota that I don't think indeterminate really pays off. Having that continued growth doesn't make a difference if we're going to freeze in mid-September. Last one of these Amish paste tomatoes, again getting these really tall indeterminate growth. We do have a tomato here, so I'm going to leave that one. I'll leave that flower, we'll just see what happens with that. For now, I'm going to top this. I don't know, there's a little tomato on there. We'll leave you for now. And this one's not awful. This is the best one of the group, that's for sure. Still some stuff to remove. And I don't put any of these disease trimmings into my compost. These go into the burn pile. Just not gonna risk it. Just kidding, I keep finding things. Okay, so I think we're looking pretty good in tomato land. Everything's been harvested. We've done our pruning. We've staked everything up, but oh my gosh, look at these. Guys, oh, they're looking so sad. We'll see if they're still in the ground in a couple of weeks, but what you'll notice is on our chore list was not weeding. My mulch is doing awesome. I mean, there's like a couple, but it's just not worth the effort at this point. If I run out of things to do, I will come and pick a couple weeds, but no, not a big deal. So next up, we have a lot of green beans to pick. If you remember from last month's garden tour when I was just really struggling with the overload of green beans. I did 4 rows of planting and they just totally took over. Yeah, and there's just, I don't even know how many pounds of green beans I've harvested so far. Maybe 40, 50 pounds. So we're still harvesting. They look smaller now since they've kind of been thrashed because I've been going through them and I just kind of pile them in the center. But let's see how much we get today. These are the Maxibel green beans. They're a bush bean and they're just beautiful. They're tender and stringless. And as long as I'm out here harvesting every few days so I can get them when they're tender and not overripe, they're great. I can already tell production is starting to slow down, but there still should be quite a few in here just in time because, call me crazy, I went ahead and planted a whole new row of bush beans from where the garlic used to be. But I had some restraint and I just did 3 rows this time. So to wait till the next garden tour to see how those are going. And I don't have any special tricks for this. It is just a matter of patience and digging and trying to get them out fully, because if you leave some, they'll go to seed and it can trigger to the plant that it needs to stop harvesting and just let things go to seed. So you want to be kind of methodical as you're going through these. I do have these wonderful Farmer's Defense sleeves that help prevent rashes from green beans. I always forget them. They're in the house. So whatever, we're just going to deal with it. If you are interested in those sleeves, they are awesome. If you think to put them on, I do have, I think it's a 10% off code. I'll put it in the description if you're interested. I'm getting little bits of rodent damage. I don't know if you can see that. There's little nibbles on there. So not too much, but a few here and there. I just toss those out in the yard. But I've definitely been preserving a lot of green bean things. I think this is going to end up being our crop of the year, which is good because as we move on to the next phase in the garden, you're going to see how some of my most reliable and dependable and productive crops is just proving to not turn out this year, which is devastating. I'm still processing it. Yeah, so just leaning into the green beans. So now I'm thankful that I did plant that another row of green beans, even though I felt like I was crazy for doing it. That's just how it goes. You gotta just lean into what's going well and better luck next year for what's not. Here's one that's overripe. You can see that you can see the seed pods starting to swell. So these are not so good for eating anymore. You can leave these on the plant to form seed pods and then you have your own seed for next year, but not good for eating anymore. More and more rodent damage. Unfortunately, those rodents, there's not much you can do about it. They'll get through my electric fence, no problem. And my cats aren't in here. I guess I could set up some mouse traps, but I feel like I would forget where they are and trap myself with my barefoot toes. No bare feet this morning though, man. It was chilly. It's starting to warm up now, but need a warmer day for that. I suppose if they were supported more and off the ground, that would probably help with the rodents. So if I had severe rodent damage, I'd probably look into some kind of a bracing system, but I don't know, it's been pretty minimal, like 1 every 30 or 40 beans. So I suppose that would be one of the huge benefits of pole beans, which after crawling through these for hours starts to feel pretty tempting. But I got away from pole beans because the couple years that I did grow them, this was years ago now, I had absolutely an awful time with Japanese beetles. They just destroyed it and it brought them in to bother the rest of my crop too. And then ever since I got rid of the pole beans, zero issues with Japanese beetles. So I'm kind of nervous to bring them back in. So I'll take crawling around in a sea of beans over destruction by the Japanese beetles, that's for sure. Whether it was a coincidence or not, I don't know, but just not gonna deal with that again. We'll probably get a few more harvests out of here, but you're starting to taper down. Then I'll pull these guys out. And I don't know, we're kind of getting late in the season to think about another crop to put in here. Probably too late to plant a third round of bush beans. I mean, they're doing well, but oh, honey, we can only eat so many beans. But there are some super short things like some varieties of turnips and radishes. Might even try a cover crop. I don't know. So many options. Or just put straw over it and let it rest. Okay, we are on the final stretch here. I've been watching a lot of the track and field on the Olympics. I feel like I'm running my own race here. Ryan and I were actually talking about we'd like to make our own Olympics track and field event, just the two of us back here, like throwing a javelin and a shot put and long jump. Why not? I've always wanted to throw a javelin. What's interesting is there's a lot more mouse damage here than over there. Must be a little nest under here or something. I will say I've noticed some snakes in here, so hopefully they'll just take care of it for me. We don't have any poisonous snakes, at least in this part of Minnesota, so they don't bother me. I actually kind of like snakes. They don't bother me at all. So green bean harvest turned out decently well. Again, not as massive as it once was. When I was first harvesting, this whole thing was just overflowing, hardly able to fit it all in. So maybe a couple of pounds. But yeah, I might freeze more of these, freeze dry them, or do dilly beans. Those are kind of the three things. Oh, I take it back. I've been fermenting these too. So I've fermented green beans. So I've been preserving them 4 different ways. So we'll just see what I'm in the mood for next time. And oh man, I got so excited about green beans, I almost skipped over the peppers. So the cayennes are definitely coming in strong. So I'm gonna pick any of those that are red. I need to get a batch of fermented hot sauce going. I've just been collecting these in my fridge, just in a gallon Ziploc bag. And we're definitely getting a big pile by now. I love these cayennes from Minnesota because they ripen early. They are pretty prolific. I mean, even this tiny little plant that looks like it shouldn't do much has a few on there. I'm also looking for if any of my pepper plants need staking. So I've already staked a few of them. So a lot of them are pretty sturdy as is, and they're just, you know, hanging on there, no issues. But some of them can get a little floppy. So all I do is just get a stick out of the woods and a piece of twine, and that's it. No need for fancy cages. I do have some cages for some of my bigger peppers that I just already had on hand, and those small cages are worthless for tomatoes, so may as well use them. But no, don't feel like you need to buy cages for your peppers, unless you're maybe in a southern climate and you get these massive pepper plants. But Minnesota, a stick is fine. And then we're also getting some good jalapenos. I try to harvest frequently so they don't get the cracking. I have quite a few of those on this plant. Maybe it's time to make a batch of salsa with those tomatoes. And then over here are some of my poblanos. I think some are ripe, so that one's looking pretty good. I've been freezing my poblanos. My favorite chili recipe requires 2 poblano peppers, and the frozen peppers are great, so I just chop it up and put 2 of them in a vacuum sealed bag, and then I just thaw it out anytime I want to make chili in the wintertime. So it's always nice when I have them harvested in pairs for that. So here's a second one, and it looks like we have 2 more here. I'll pull these guys off. Cool. So I add these guys to the basket. This bucket is definitely starting to get full. And while we're on the pepper train, let's go ahead and finish up over here. See what we can find in our other pepper patch. This pepper is starting to look large. This is supposed to be a red pepper, so I'm not gonna pick that one yet. Hopefully it'll ripen in time. Not quite ripe on that either. That needs to be red. But look at these purple peppers. This is a variety that I got from my nursery and I just couldn't resist, and oh, they're just so gorgeous. Looks like we have a second one on here, a little bit smaller. These are my red picnic peppers. I've picked a few so far, but these aren't quite ready yet. My Corno de Toro peppers are also looking good, but not quite red yet. So the pepper game still isn't in full force yet here in Minnesota. But at least we got these little guys. So next up, we do have a couple of things that need to happen in my new bean patch. First of all, my pumpkins and my butternut squash are starting to creep in a little bit. That was definitely a risk putting this next to my vines, but I'm gonna start just kind of hacking off these new leaders. Again, we're getting late in the season. This is not gonna produce a huge squash in just a month's time. So there is a little baby squash on here, but I think I'm gonna cut my losses here. Plus, this is gonna help the plant direct its energy into ripening what it does have, so that I do have a harvest in about a month. Looks like we have a huge just leaf coming in here. Plenty of leaves. I'm not trying to grow a pumpkin for the state fair, so I'm okay with cutting this off. Looks like we have a big one here. And one thing you may have noticed that sets this row apart from the rest of my garden is there is no mulch, or there is a little remainder, I guess. So I cleaned it all off so that I could put seeds down so they'd actually get light and germinate well. And now that they're up, it is time to get the mulch back down so they don't end up with a weed disaster situation, and of course all the other benefits that mulch brings. So I saved the mulch that I pulled off, and the thing that I love about that, we can go grab that together, is that the seeds in that organic straw has already sprouted, so I'm not going to have to deal with that first flush of wheatgrass essentially popping up. So hi guys, so here it is. I just saved it in a grow bag. That worked pretty good, so we'll get this back over there. Ooh, scissors are pointy in my pocket. All right, and off we go. No real trick to it. I just like to go at least a few inches thick. You don't want to just sprinkle it over the top, otherwise you could smash these little seedlings. So, you know, be careful. It'll save you so much time in the future with weeding, and then just plant health. You'll have a better harvest, healthier soil, all those things. Ooh, a rock. I'm glad we did this fun stuff first, because I feel like I'm in a better mood than I was this morning when I was anticipating what we're gonna have to do together. But yeah, it's time. Let's do it. And that is my prized onions. It doesn't look like too much because last night I went out in a panic and I did a bunch of chopping. So, but I left a few so you guys could see it, and my onions have bolted or gone to seed. I've never had this happen. I've read about it, I've heard warnings about it, never experienced it, and it finally happened to me. So all of the flowers you can see are over here. I just kind of hacked them all off late last night and threw them in the yard. What this means is that the onion plant thinks that it's in its second year and it's time to reproduce. So in this little flower, if it keeps developing, will get all puffy, and then eventually little onion seeds are going to be in here. So for some reason, my onion plants have thought that it's gone through its first year and it's on its second year and is now reproducing. That can happen due to a multitude of reasons, but the overarching underlying thing is stress. So it could be too much water, which we've had, too little water. No, we haven't had that. It can be temperature fluctuations, so it just thinks that it's moving through the seasons and it's gotten to its second year, which we definitely have. We had a really cold spring and then it got hot for a while. It's cold again now, kind of unseasonably cold. I think our high was only in the 60s yesterday, so it could be temperature fluctuations. I also wonder if my plan to be a greedy gardener and do more dense planting, so I did a 4-inch spacing versus my typical 6-inch spacing. Maybe it's just feeling a little crowded and they're doing the white flag thing. I don't know. I asked some of my local gardening friends if their onions are bolting. They said no, but they are noticing carrots bolting. So it could be a weather thing, it could be a spacing thing, but ultimately what's going to happen now is the sad part. So when the onion plant has decided it's time to go to seed, growth of the actual bulbs down below completely halts. And so there's going to be no more growth even if I cut off those flowering tips on the end. So there's really no hope for them continuing to grow. And actually, if I just leave them, you know, fingers crossed, hoping that they'll keep growing, they could actually rot into the ground. So I'm forced to harvest them all today. Thankfully, they're, you know, decent bulbs, especially, you know, this point in the season in Minnesota. I typically don't harvest for at least a few more weeks. Some are small, not very good at all, but at least I have decent bulbs, so not all is lost. And that's fine, like I can harvest them now and have smaller onions, but the most traumatic thing is what I've been reading, again, I've never dealt with this before, is that they're not gonna store well. And onions are an absolute survival crop for us. Usually I have a really good harvest and they store well, just cold storage. I don't have to can them or freeze them, just as is, so low input, and we eat them for an entire year. And we eat a lot of onions, and half of me is just wanting to cure them and just see what happens. But the other half of me is like, is it worth it to just pack them all away and have them all rot and not store well, and then I have nothing at all? So if you have dealt with bolting onions before, please let me know what you did and if you were able to get them to store and cure well, or if I'm gonna have to go to plan B and just maybe freeze dry it all. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not happy. Here's one of the more developed flower stalks that I pulled off last night. You can see that these are just the beginnings of little onion seeds there. But as you go down, this is a really hardy stalk. It's just incredible. It's very strong and rigid. You can kind of hear it crunching. It's almost like a big celery stalk maybe. What happens is this is going all the way down through the center of the bulb of the onion, and it can, I guess, split open the bulb and cause it to rot in the inside. So, and of course we rained yesterday, so a little bit dirtier coming out, but not awful. Last year I had an incredible harvest. They stored probably my best ever. So, just never know what the year's gonna bring. At least they're decent, you know, edible. Well, hopefully edible. I guess that's the other thing that I was reading, that once they go to seed, they start to lose quality and taste. So hopefully they taste okay. But as far as learning lessons, how to prevent this in the future, I mean, there's only so much you can do about the weather, right? But I think the crowding, again, I don't know if that's it. I mean, they don't seem too crowded. I'll definitely not do that next year just in case if that's the issue. A lot of these are pretty small. Kind of see, I mean, we can use those, but they're not prize onions, that's for sure. The good news is that my shallot harvest was unbelievable. I can show you that up by the house, so maybe we'll just be eating off of shallots. Those didn't bolt, so I don't know what the difference is there. The other bummer about these now that they have bolted is this neck is super rigid. So I typically like to braid my onions for storage. I have a YouTube video on it from last fall, and I think there's no way I'll be able to do that. All right, everything's out. It's a lot of onions to try to deal with if I truly have to preserve them all. So stay tuned to see how that saga continues. And now I have an empty bed that I wasn't expecting to have. So stay tuned on what I end up doing with this spot. So let's move on to something a little bit more fun, shall we? So zucchini is looking good. Looks like we have one more to pick. I've been trying to get these daily or at least every other day. I have a hard time getting these to come off cleanly. There we go. Good little twist action. This is my store-bought zucchini, and I think they're turning out pretty okay. Add it to our little bean collection. Next up are all the broccoli side shoots. So we're getting a bunch of those. Here we go. Snapping those off. We ate the rest of them last night. We made a delicious stir fry, so be glad to restock on these side shoots. Some more in here, more here. pretty good for the side shoots. Now we have some maintenance to do on my brassica family. So I like to go down in my kale plants and remove any of these, like yellowing leaves, anything that's not good for eating or contributing to the plant in any way. I'll throw these out in the yard again. We'll have a big cleanup day to do, whatever the chickens don't eat. I'm also going to do the same thing with my Brussels sprout. These leaves are really nice. They have some good color. The stems have some good color to them, but these lower ones, they're starting to get purpley and just droopy. So these, it's time for them to go. And then the last thing I'm looking for over here is any evidence of the aster yellows again. And I think this nasturtium, it's time for it to go. Let me get my shadow out of the way. There we go. So you can see this is 2 plants. This one has really small bunches of lots of leaves. Some is yellowing, where this one is large and better at least. It's probably on its way out, but this one's definitely showing evidence of disease. So we're gonna pull this one out and definitely dispose of this one. And you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and just pull this one too. It's already starting to show some discoloration. It's not putting out flowers anymore. It's only a matter of time. And then this will free up this whole area. Sorry, nasturtiums. It's been a good ride. All right, so let's move on to the next phase. I have my onions in the wagon to bring back to the cabin to figure out what to do with that. But we have some new plants to plant, so we're not quite done yet. Okay, I had to take a pause to go drink some water and eat a snack. We were out there for 3 hours and I was getting hungry and dizzy. I needed to rehydrate. So next up, let's work on planting. I did mention about harvesting in the pepper plants up by the house, but since they're so close to the cabin, I've been harvesting. There was nothing to pull there. So nothing to show there. But over here, I'll show you my little seedlings. So here is my fall crop of rutabagas that I did start from seed because I've been battling those root maggots. So I'll show you my game plan for how we're hopefully going to get these guys to finish out. I also have a bunch of turnips. I was also struggling with the root maggots on those, so we'll get the turnips planted. I also have some bok choy, and then I do have some little lettuces. They're still pretty small. I think I'll still wait another week to plant those, but we'll get these bigger ones into the ground. So here is where they're going. I got some insect netting and set this up a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really hoping that's gonna help protect these guys from the root maggots that just destroyed my spring crop. So we'll give it a go. Get these last little weeds out of here. So we need to figure out a good layout. The rutabagas get quite a bit bigger than the turnips. The rutabagas need about a 8-inch spacing. The turnips, only like 3 to 4 inches. We'll just start laying them out. Hopefully I'll have room for them all. I love these epic cells because it has these holes where I can just pop my finger through to pop them out. No more digging in there anymore or pulling on the seedling, which can stress them. And actually, I'm realizing these are 2 different kinds of rutabagas. These are Eleanor rutabagas, and the other one are Joan rutabagas. So I'll want to keep them separate and see which one does better. I'm kind of thinking you do rutabagas down the center and maybe turnips on the side. My hand's about 6 inches long. I keep it really official around here. And the turnips here, it'll be tight, but yeah, I think that'll do it. And I could put compost down in here in each of the holes to replace nutrients from the previous crop, but my previous crop was hardly in here. It all got eaten and I pulled it out. So hopefully the root maggots aren't in the soil anymore either. I did have good success with radishes last fall, which also can be affected by the root maggots. So there's a good chance that that pest just isn't as prevalent in the fall, but we're playing to win. These rutabagas are a huge crop for us in that they store really well. And if we don't have onions, I need those rutabagas. Finding lots of worms, that's a good sign. Okay, now the turnips. And I believe these are purple turnips, which I love. They're so beautiful. We'll see if we can fit all of the turnips in here or not. If not, we can try our luck out back. See how they do back there. Which isn't always bad. I like to do a little experiment and just see how the same plant does in different spots. That would rule out if the netting worked or not, or if it's just a seasonal thing. Time to move this somewhere else. Definitely gotten lots of rain. Almost 2 inches. So I think we're gonna have some extra room here. The turnips definitely take up less space, which is great. So I think what I'm gonna do for that little spot up there is throw a couple of my bok choy in there. I think that'll be great. Hi, little guys. That feels about right. Cool, let's get the netting back on. Good luck, little guys. This doesn't feel like a square to me. What is happening? I don't know. Okay. Okay. See how she does. So I brought the onions up. Still to be decided on those, but definitely can't cure them like that. They are way packed together. So probably time to start working on this garlic. If you missed my garlic harvest video, definitely check that out on how I cure them and everything, but they're looking nice and dry. I think it's time that I can pack them away into storage, which is gonna free up more room for curing maybe my onions, but definitely my shallots. The shallots are in here, but holy cow, they did so well. I mean, I feel like these are almost the size of an onion, so at least I have that going for me. And the next steps for the garlic are super simple. I just trim off the root hairs. I trim off the neck about here, put them in a mesh bag. And if you have a root cellar, that's great, but I don't have one. So I just store them in the cabin. That's the coolest location I have at the moment until it starts to get a lot cooler out. So just keep these guys in a mesh bag. I'll link them in the description if you want to check it out. But these are just gonna hang out until we get ready for planting in October. Actually, I already have a YouTube video on garlic planting from last year, so if you wanna get an idea of what that's gonna look like coming up in October, definitely check that out. Well, that's about it for our garden maintenance for today. We'll have to do it all over again, well, except for the onions piece, in just a few days. So we're definitely in the heat of harvest. To be determined on the onion situation again. If you have dealt with that in the past, please let me know what you did and whether curing them and storing them worked or not. I'll probably do a little bit of both and just see what happens. But as always, it was so fun to have you out in the garden today, especially for a little moral support during the whole onion ordeal. We have garden tour coming up for August, so we only saw a little snippet of the garden. There's a lot of other things going on, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next one.